One time back when I was in high school, I was left home alone for a weekend. My older sister was off at college, and my parents were both going to a friend's wedding that was out of town. They left on Friday and would be back on Sunday. In the meantime, I would be alone at the house for that time. It was not a big deal at all, because I had been home by myself many times. I was, I believe, a sophomore, so I was still too young to drive, but I figured I would just hang out around the house after school during the weekend. After my parents left, I went to school, and then I came home and was by myself. It was a relaxing night of just watching TV, eating pizza, and playing around on my phone. I stayed up later than usual because I didn't have school the next day. I was in the living room with most of the lights out and the TV on at a low volume. I was watching YouTube or something on my phone and was going to go to bed soon as I started to get tired. It was probably after 10 p.m. or so, maybe later, and there was suddenly a knock at the front door. It totally took me by surprise, because obviously I was not expecting anyone. Being home by myself, and with it being late at night, this made me a little bit nervous, but I honestly didn't think it was anything that bad. I really didn't want to answer the door regardless of who it was though, so I stayed on the couch, hoping they would just go away, but they knocked again. I decided at that point to go and see who was there, so I got up and moved over to a window. When I did, I looked to see a man standing there by the front door holding a small box in his hand. He also had a hat that looked like it was from a delivery company. I felt super relieved when I realized that it was just a delivery guy. He knocked on the door again though, now for a third time. This time he said, "Delivery." I was a little bit confused, because first of all, it was late at night, but also, why could he not just drop the package and go? I guess some packages require someone to sign for it, but how could we be expected to do so at an hour when many people are sleeping? I wasn't sure what he was delivering either. I hadn't ordered anything, but my parents possibly could have. I figured they did. The man knocked again, and once more he said, "I have a delivery for you." I didn't think that he knew I was in there. It would have been impossible for him to see me, but I was figuring he wasn't allowed to make the delivery unless someone answered the door or something like that. So as much as I didn't want to answer the door so late at night, I also didn't want my parents to miss their package and have to go pick it up someplace. So I walked over to the door to answer it. When I got there, I was literally like a foot from the door and about to open it when I heard the man try opening the door from the other side. I froze. The guy was trying the handle. I could not believe that he was trying to just walk into the house. I certainly was not going to open the door for him now. He didn't stop there though. The man then basically seemed to throw himself against the door with his whole body. I heard a very loud thud. It was like he was trying to break the door down. I took a couple steps away. He did it again though. He was seemingly backing up a few steps and then ramming into the door with his shoulder or something to try to force it open. The guy really wanted to deliver the package, I guess. Either that or he was trying to break into the house, and the package delivery was just a ruse to get me to open the door. I figured that it was probably the latter. I did what really just came to my mind in that moment, which was to turn on the lights. One switch went to that front door area inside the house, and the other to outside. When I turned both these lights on at once, the man suddenly stopped. Then he started running away. I heard him leave the front door area, and then I looked out a window and saw him sprint out the yard and down the street. At that point, I called the cops. They came out and investigated, but the guy was long gone. I really didn't have a great description either. After that, they left. I was really nervous to go to sleep that night, but thankfully, the guy never returned. He was obviously a fake delivery guy. I think either he wanted me to answer the door, or he was just pretending to be a delivery guy to not look suspicious in case another neighbor saw him. Either way, it was extremely creepy. I also sometimes wonder if he knew that my parents were out of town because their car was gone, so the driveway was empty. So possibly, when I went to the door, he was startled not thinking anybody was home. When I was younger, I used to work for this local restaurant that was in my hometown. It was a place that was well known in the city, and I worked there for over a year. In my time there, I did several different things. At one point, I was the main delivery driver. We offered online ordering, or people could just call in and order as well. Even though we were not a pizza place, it worked pretty much the same way as pizza delivery does. I would go out and deliver the food to wherever. The town I lived in was pretty average for the most part, as some parts were busier and others quiet. So one night when I was working, we got an order for a delivery. I took it and was going to drive it to the address. At this point, it was a little bit later and things had quieted down. We would also be closing pretty soon as well. So I took the food, left the restaurant, and headed out to my car. Then I drove to the address. It was about 10 minutes away, in a quieter end of town. After driving to the neighborhood, I saw that it was pretty average looking. I had not been there before, but I found the address and parked my car on the side of the road out front. Now, this house had a fairly large front yard, and the house was normal looking for the most part. There were a good amount of trees in the area, and just a few dim streetlights along the block, so the lighting wasn't the greatest. I stepped out of my car and took the bag of food. When I started walking up the driveway to the house, I realized that none of the lights appeared to be on. The house was almost completely dark. I made it up to the front step, only to see a piece of paper taped to the door that said, "Back door, please." I wasn't too thrilled to see that, but maybe the door didn't work or something. So I walked around the house back over to the driveway and I saw a side door, but that one also had a piece of paper on it that said, "Back door." So I walked all the way around the house and was now in the backyard. Here it was much quieter. The backyard was not very big, but it was fenced in with a wooden fence, had overgrown grass, and some random junk lying around the yard. There was also a good number of trees and bushes in the backyard. I felt kind of creeped out going back there. I located the back door though, and then knocked on it, as there was no doorbell to ring. I was just hoping that this would be a normal interaction, and that somebody would just come to the door, take the food, and pay me. Oh yeah, I should mention that the order had not been paid for yet. So I needed to get the money, and I couldn't just drop the food and leave like I wanted to. At first, nobody came to the door. The lights in the back of the house all appeared off as well. I nervously looked around. Everything was calm back there, and it was pretty quiet aside from the leaves blowing in the wind. I was about to knock again when I heard the sound of footsteps approaching the door from inside the house. I got even more nervous. Now, I had made many deliveries before, but for some reason I was way more nervous here. Then the door opened. There, standing in front of me, was a tall man who was wearing all black, including a ski mask. He had black shoes, sweatpants, a long-sleeve shirt, and then a mask covering his entire head aside from his eyes. I was really confused and creeped out, to say the least. The man did not say anything, but I reached out and handed him the food. He took it, and I told him the price. The guy still said nothing, but then waved me to come more inside. He took a few steps back into the house, motioning for me to follow. I stayed just outside the house and said, "No thanks, I can just wait here." I assumed that he was going to get the money. I didn't know if he was trying to freak me out, or if this was just his preferred clothing choice around the house at night. He then stepped back towards me, still motioning for me to follow. I remained where I was. Then he got even closer and reached out and sort of grabbed my arm. To be honest, it wasn't an aggressive grab, like he was trying to suddenly pull me into the house. It was more of an encouraging touch to say, "Come on in." But still, as soon as he reached out, I jumped back and just took off. I ran away, sprinting back around the house, and not stopping until I made it all the way back to my car. He did not chase after me at all to my knowledge, but still, I didn't care. I drove away and was so relieved to just be out of there. I made it back to the restaurant and told my boss of what happened. He was not mad or anything, thankfully, and he understood. Instead, we put the address on the do not deliver list. In the rest of my time working there, I never delivered to that street again. Personally, that experience still creeps me out to think about it. I'm not sure what that man was doing or what his intentions were. Perhaps he was just trying to scare me and thought it was funny. But I would advise anybody ordering food to not come to the door with all the lights off, wearing all black and a ski mask. It might scare the delivery driver. I live alone in a pretty small house that I'm renting. I've lived here for a few years now. The neighborhood is large, but generally pretty quiet. Last year, something happened that was really creepy. I still think about it all the time. So, one night, I was by myself at home in the living room. I didn't have work the following day, so I was staying up really late watching a movie. It was probably like 2 a.m., and I sat on my chair by the couch, and I remember that I heard a car come driving down the street. This was not that unusual, but with it being really late at night, I glanced over out the window. The car drove slowly down my street and then pulled over across the street from my house and a ways down from it. When I saw this, I did not recognize the car, but overall, I didn't think too much of it. I turned my attention back to the movie. However, maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, I heard a car door open and close, and I looked back over. I now saw a man emerging from the vehicle. He was wearing pretty much normal clothes, but then a blue Amazon vest over it. I realized that he was an Amazon delivery driver. It was strange that he was making a delivery at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it actually does happen. There are many people who have stuff shipped overnight, and I knew that some people who deliver for Amazon do not even drive the Amazon trucks and use their own vehicles. So I kept watching the man just out of curiosity. However, I noticed that he crossed the street and appeared to be walking straight for my house. When he started to enter my front yard, I quickly ducked down from my chair. My windows were mostly covered by the shades, but there was still a fairly large open spot where I could look out or someone could see in. I went down onto the carpet floor and then crawled behind my chair that I had been sitting on. I hadn't ordered anything on Amazon Prime at all, so I didn't know why this guy would go into my yard. Also, he didn't have any packages with him. I thought maybe he would come to my front door, but the way he had been walking was just into the yard. Things were silent until I heard footsteps arrive just outside my front living room window, just feet away from me. I very slowly and carefully peeked around the corner of the chair, just enough to see. The man was standing there right outside my living room window, looking in with his hands on the glass. I moved back out of sight, hoping that he didn't see me. I didn't know what was going on. The man remained there, just looking inside my house for probably a whole minute or so. Then I heard him walking away. I didn't know if he was going to try to break in or what. I moved out from behind the chair and saw that he was no longer at the window. I went over to the window and looked, to see the man walking through the end of my yard and now entering my next-door neighbor's yard. I watched him go right up to their front window and start looking in it the same way he had been to mine. The man was there for probably 30 seconds. Then I heard a neighborhood dog start barking. I'm not sure where the dog was. I didn't have one, but it sounded like it was either one of the houses next door to me, across, or possibly someplace else. Either way, when this happened, the man suddenly backed up and then walked away. He kind of jogged across the street back to his car. Then, moments later, he drove away. I was glad for the dog barking and glad that he was gone. It was really suspicious behavior. I decided to call the police non-emergency line and report it. Unfortunately, I really didn't have any good information. I didn't get a great look at the guy with it being nighttime and dark out, just a very basic description. I also didn't get a license plate, but just a basic look of the car. I didn't even know the exact make and model, but I thought that it was still good to report it. I think that maybe he was possibly thinking about breaking in, or maybe planning to break in later. Either way, he did not. I haven't seen the guy since, and I'm hoping that he didn't break into anybody else's place. I'm not sure if he was an actual Amazon delivery driver that was up to no good, or just pretending to be one to blend in. Either way, I see no reason for an Amazon Prime delivery driver to be looking in people's windows so late at night. I'm a delivery driver and have been one for many years. The craziest thing to happen to me took place roughly 20 years ago. I had just made one of my last deliveries for the night. I drove a pretty large truck. It was a box truck, and I made deliveries mostly to businesses in the area. I would sometimes work into the night, not super late, but it was probably like 8 p.m. by now. Still, I would be getting off very shortly. So I had finished up a delivery to a company in the sort of industrial part of town and was now driving out of it. By now these roads were very quiet. There was a winding road and it had 2 lanes, one going each direction. I remember that I came around a bend to a spot that was mostly going through the woods. There had been a car driving behind me, but no other cars in sight. That is, until I came to this spot in the woods and saw a car driving super slow up ahead. It was going like 20 miles per hour. As I approached it, the car only went slower and slower. Being in a large box truck, I normally didn't make maneuvers of passing anybody, but I figured that I would have to go around this car because I didn't know why it was driving so slow. It slowed down to probably like 5 miles per hour, and I had to slow way down as well. I started to move into the left lane to pass the car, but then it quickly made a turn to the left as well, as if to block me. That's instantly what it seemed like it was doing. I was confused. The car then stopped completely, and so did I in my truck. Meanwhile, the car behind me drove right up to within a few feet of my truck and then stopped. I wasn't sure what to do, but then I saw the door open to the car that was blocking my way, and a man got out. He started aggressively walking towards my truck. Meanwhile, I heard the door open to the car behind me as well. I realized that these guys had me blocked in and were coming after me. The only thing I could think to do was to drive away. My truck was a lot stronger than their measly cars, so I hit the gas and went forward. I turned, and the guy was still running to my driver's door. I hit part of his car, but my truck was easily able to keep moving. The man then ran away back towards his car. I went around him and kept going down the street. This led to the car behind me, and then later the damaged car, both following after me down the road. However, as I was driving, I called the cops on my cell phone. I told them what had happened and where I was and where I was going. I was hoping that the cops would get there and pull everybody over. However, not long after this, the cars both turned off onto another road behind me. The police arrived a few minutes later. I didn't have license plate numbers of the cars, but one of them was damaged. I was hoping that the guy would be found, but I never heard anything more. I think those guys were going to try to rob me or something, but I really don't know. I just know they were definitely up to no good, and I'm just glad that I got away from them. I used to work as a delivery driver for UPS many years ago now. There is one memory that stands out as being the craziest and also the scariest thing that ever happened to me when I worked there. So I had been working there for over a year at this point. I drove a standard brown UPS truck and made deliveries around the city that I worked in. The city was pretty large, and it had a busy area and then a quieter area as well. After a long day of work, I was down to my last few deliveries for the day. It was getting later, and I was looking forward to being done and going home. So I remember I stopped in this neighborhood to make a delivery. I pulled over to the side of the road, got out, opened the back, got the package, and then went up to the house and delivered it. I went back and got in my truck after that and then left. So I then left the neighborhood and had a bit of a drive before the last spot where I was making a few final deliveries. In the process of driving there, within a couple of minutes, I started to hear what sounded like a noise coming from the back of my truck. At first, I just dismissed it, but I soon realized that it really sounded like someone or something was back there. It made no sense though. Why would there be a noise in the back of my truck? I kept listening to the sound, and it wasn't constant, but it was a sound that I had not heard at all prior to that during the day. It sounded as though someone was moving around back there, and the packages were moving around. I decided to see what was up. I happened to be driving on a pretty quiet road at that moment. It was sort of winding, and it was in the quieter part of town. To the right was a ditch and a bit of grass, and then woods. To the left was some houses that were fairly spread out. There was a good amount of space on the side of the road to pull over, and after doing so, I listened more. The noises quieted down, but it sounded as though someone was walking around in the back of my truck. I was pretty creeped out by this, so I got out and walked closer to the back. Then I shouted, asking if anybody was in there. No one answered me. I went to the back door and opened it just a crack. I yelled that if anybody was in my truck, the door was open and they needed to leave. But still, there was nothing. I didn't open the door all the way because, to be honest, I was too creeped out. After I said that, though, nobody left. I wasn't quite sure what to do. After about a minute, I decided to open the doors all the way and see. I went to the door and opened it. But as soon as I did, I was rushed. Whoever was inside the truck suddenly ran up and then kicked me. They came running really fast, and they kicked at me, and I would have been kicked right in the face, but I moved my head just in time. The kick got me in the shoulder and part of my head. It knocked me back, and I fell to the ground. A man then emerged, and I really barely saw him because it all happened so fast. But he then ran past me and into the woods. I watched from the ground as he quickly disappeared into the trees like a wild animal might. I was slightly hurt, but not bad. I got to my feet and then called the cops and went back inside my truck. Then I waited for them to arrive. By the time they got there about 5 minutes later, I told them everything. However, when they searched around, the man was gone. I gave the best description that I could, but I didn't remember any great details. I was then able to finish and go home. I don't believe the man was ever found. It's one of the craziest things that I've ever seen. I'm not sure when exactly the man entered my truck. I think it was when I made the last delivery, because that's when I started hearing him. He could have been walking down the street or something and entered my truck when I was up at the house making the delivery. My back would have been to the truck at that point, and also the back of my truck would have been open. Plus, there were still some boxes in there that he could have hid behind, and it was dark in the truck as well, so I probably wouldn't have noticed him. But overall, it was just crazy how it happened.